And I am going to looking at new city directories recently. So this is all about learning to use a current city directory, like a 2020 or a 2021, to create a neighborhood description. Now, if you're like me, I've kind of been reluctant to use recent city directories because they weren't always up to date. I can tell you that in Great Falls, for instance, my daughter has been gone from this earth for a decade and she's still in the city directory. And so I always pretty much poo-pooed and said, yeah, well, you can use it, but you need to trust but verify the information. I would still say that. Remember that the older city and county directories usually included a description of the town area and the county. And this information has always been helpful as you write a geographic descriptor of where your ancestor lived. Maybe you don't know too much about Crenshaw, Pennsylvania, or you don't know too much about Broomtown, New York, or whatever, but you can use the descriptors in those city county directories that are out online to give yourself an idea and your family an idea of what that geographic area looked like where your ancestor lived. That's always been helpful. Well, let me tell you about today's city directories that have kind of changed my mind, at least helping me to understand how I can use them as a great resource. They can be used to describe how the ancestor's home area has changed or hasn't changed, but now you get to dig down to the street and area information for comparisons that you might want to make in your family story. You know, when my folks, I was excited because I figured I would find my folks as a married couple with a couple of kids in the 1940 census. And so I think I've told you before, but I volunteered. I was on that site at midnight when those results were released, and I had volunteered to do the area, to type in the area for a part of Lake County and Flathead County in Montana. I knew just right where the things were, and I did my job, and I didn't find my folks there. Now I know that just by looking at the 1940, 1941 directory for Flathead County, there was a clue there that would have told me what was going on. The clue was that the census area that they were in for 1940 was not well described. I was lucky. I knew the names of people in that area and who should be there in 1940. And of course, my folks weren't there. My dad's folks were. But they weren't there. And my clue should have been that there was no particular descriptor, in fact, which told me what part of the area was Ferndale, one side of the Swan River, and what side was the Swan River residential area. They were all just lumped together with a list and no descriptor for any one thing, not a road descriptor or anything else. Well, if I would have looked in the first place there, I would have known that my folks were not there in 1940 because that's where the information came from for the 1940 Kalispell census. And I did not, for the 1940 Kalispell directory, and I did not realize that. I've told you before that the US Census information is used constantly and has been used constantly for business and for all kinds of applications. And that was just as true in 1940. So what's new that could help you in today's city directories? They're still going forward. I admit I hadn't looked at them until this last week, not really clearly anyway. Well, Polk City Directory, which is what we have in Montana, is a division of Info Group, and they're a huge provider of business and consumer data and marketing solutions. And guess where Info Group gets all of its information? That's right. They get it from the U.S. Census Bureau. They are able, thusly, within the directories to give you direct mailing ideas based on your business's product. They can help you do email campaigns. They can do what they call email appends. They can go right out to your directly if you belong to their little group, and they can maintain that also through those years. They can provide you with business specialty lists and consumer specialty lists and lists for nonprofits, all kinds of things, and online directories to find new customers nationally and locally. So they're really continuing to do quite a bit. Each section in the newer city directories has a key for symbols, and there are 6 sections. That's very different from what we've seen before. And I would tell you that in Montana, from what I've been able to see, these 6 sections appear in beginning 2015. There's an alphabetical section. Remember, in the old city directories, you could find out who was living in the house, and R was for a resident. Well, now they have residers or householders or homeowners or householder homeowners with symbols. You can tell right in the listing. You can tell the home value, the head of household age, the number of adults by name at that address, who's a retiree, email address availability. Any changes made to that listing in the last 12 months will be indicated by a little check mark. They'll tell you who's got a dual income family, whether wireless, and their wireless telephone number is available, who's a business owner, and what the nature of the business is. For the business part, you know, those yellow pages, of course, it's the full company name, the address, the phone numbers, the branch offices, number of employees, owner and key officers, and hours, for example. A lot of information there. In a street guide, the streets are listed alphanumerically and described by zip and carrier route. The intersecting streets are listed. Now, that's the same as what we saw in many of these city directories for years, but these carrier routes are something else. This will also tell you in the street guide for that address, the year the home was built. Trust but verify that one. It identifies whether it's an in-home business, who the owner of the business is, and is there a wireless number, and it's available right there if it's public. The adults in the home by name, the length of residency at the address, the office buildings and the tenants, and the email address availability, changes in record again with that little check mark, and a street summary of household and businesses for a particular area. So you can see how you could just take a little area. They're going to show you what area you want, by the way, for your area, if you're going to make a descriptor of a particular neighborhood. In the wireless key, which wasn't there until 2015, you're going to find consumers and families with listed wireless numbers. Mine's not listed, I can tell you. You'll see it as a typical listing by surname and first name with the number, the name, the address, and the community abbreviation for that area. So you're still going to be able to see those small towns out and around, like Belt or Cascade or whatever. How does the U.S. Census info help? Well, it's got this thing called FIPS, the Federal Information Processing System, and it shows the codes for states and counties. You can go out and Google it. You can actually go to your county and the processing system FIPS code, so you can see what exactly is being used in your area. And this is what helps the U.S. Census Bureau and the state to update their information all the time and give current, good economic information. So I'm saying FIPS is for you and me. It's a great help provided by the US Census, and it's updated often enough. They uniquely identify the geographic areas. I mean, we already know about GPS, but GPS isn't here. It just tells you even more stuff. The number of digits varies, depends on the level of geography. State level has 2 digits, county level 5 digits, and so on. And I've given you the information here and in the notes so you can go there. But believe me, I just Googled it. I just Googled FIPS and it came right up. The demographic summary section, which wasn't there until 2015. Well, it was there, but you didn't know what it was or how to use it. It determines which geographic areas have best potential for your products and services, whatever you are. If you're a nonprofit, if you're a business or whatever, you have the freedom to be able to use that in addition to their online stuff if you're a member of their online service. It gives you the average estimated income for a household, the household age, the median age of adults in that household, the median home values for that area, the household incomes, median, owner versus renter occupancy, and the average years lived at the address. Again, I would trust but verify. It gives you a demographic summary, another section of for all addresses in that FIPS code census tract. Now, if it was 2015, the census tract information they're referring to is that ED or that particular descriptor for the neighborhood composition, the education, the income, and the housing. Yeah, folks, this is exactly what the census was headed to for a long time. And this is what they've been able to do with the information that they've gained through these 10-year decennial censuses, such that they could go to information given every month. So this is a strategy for genealogists, I think. We have to think of how we can use this information as we look backwards at the communities in which our ancestors lived. So I was looking backward at Ferndale and knowing that it was very, very rural, right on the line between Lake County and Flathead County. And if I looked at that community and I saw the sparseness of the number of people and then got a gander at the census map itself, because it's available, then that could really help me. And how could it help us write neighborhood descriptors for our family histories? Well, the first thing I've done and provided with my family this week, because I thought it was fun, didn't take long, and I could put it out at our private Facebook site, was I wrote a neighborhood descriptor that compared how it was in 1940 and how it is today, because it's movie star area today in Montana. Lots of movie stars in the area, lots of land that is worth an unbelievable amount. And my dad would be rolling if he knew that the land he sold for $50 an acre is way beyond that today. There are 5 pages of demographic use tips. And if you go into a library, whatever library you go into, if you're in Helena, if you're in Great Falls, if you're at a library in Missoula, you're going to be able to go look at these pages in the local city directories from 2015 forward. Yeah, businesses are using this. Even little tiny businesses can use this because they've made it comfortable for people to be able to just work with paper pencil really quickly. You need to learn to read and learn how to use these demographic tips because they're really going to help you. They're going to help you with people who are saying, can you tell me a little bit about what that neighborhood is like down there on Wire Mill Road? Can you tell me what Black Eagle is like? Can you tell me what East Helena is like? Can you tell me what Elliston is like? You can, for example, do a comparison of then and now in a family history, because a geographic and demographic description should be a must-have in your family history, even when you're just trying to explain it to family members. So what was the town or the city or the area like when your ancestor or family lived there? And what is it like in present time? Establish a profile of your ancestors and their neighborhood. You know, that fan club we've talked about before. You'll find the fan club, of course, in the census. You're going to find it in land records, and in land records, those land records relate to that census tract and street guides. And by the way, it's called a census tract to street guide reference to identify all the neighborhoods in the census tract. I had to identify 3 to get to my folks or my grandparents in 1940 up there in Ferndale. So yeah, the census tract, the one used in a 2019 Polk guide would come from the 2010 US Census. And so you have to remember that. We have another reference person to go to. We can go out to that wonderful Stephen Morse active site that is free for his information on how to identify neighborhoods back in time of a particular census. He'll show you how to find certain neighborhoods and relate those neighborhoods to now from 1880 forward. So his thing is called the Unified Census ED Finder, and I've given you that before in other talks, but I'm giving it to you again. So between the new city directories, and they are, I think that they're just giving us fantastic information. You're going to be able to find the approximate neighborhood for an ancestor. You can also use the census ED number from the census if you've got it. That's up there in that right-hand corner. You can write a brief statement about the neighborhood and neighbors for that time. Compare that to the same place today. Use today's FIPS and census tract info to get the facts necessary and write how it's changed. Doesn't have to be long. It can be a very, very brief statement, or maybe as you get a little more familiar with what the FIPS gives you, you'll be able to include more because it talks about all the people in that neighborhood. And unless you've got a neighborhood that is totally changed, for instance, I can tell you, I'm willing to bet that the census information prior to Katrina down in St. Louis, that one's going to be very different because the neighborhood's really changed and people left. So that one would be one where you'd have to take a big grain of salt, and I make you bet that they have compensated for that, and they tell you that they have. So that's my little report to you tonight on census information. You have those notes. You have the availability to be able to look at new city directories from 2015 forward. In Montana, I can tell you that that's when it keys in and the information is there. There are little color inserts that give you all the instructions on how to use all of that information in each and every city directory. If you get in and you're looking at them, I recommend that you run off at the end of that. You run off for yourself the 5 pages that includes the FIPS information and the census identifier information, because you're going to be able to use that any place in the United States. And Larry, I make you bet that with the guides being used in Canada, that's also true there. So, questions? I took 14 minutes.
Do you suppose that it started at the same time all across the country, or?
I'm assuming that it probably did, although I could tell you that in bigger cities, they've probably had a need to use this and they probably started inserting that information beforehand. I noticed, Larry, that the Lewistown Guide, Polk City Directory that we got for 2018 includes all these sections. The ones for the smaller counties, the book is certainly smaller. The instructions are still there. They're an interesting piece of information. There's not as much wireless information in those rurals.
Sure.